What is going on, ProGuides family? It is your host Sergeant Frost, and welcome to Valorant 2022. The beginning of a new year means a new episode and a new act, and that calls for our first tier list of the new year. This is going to be a tier list that you don't want to miss because we are finally introducing the new agent Neon to our tier list. Without further ado, let's not waste any time and hop right into the video. Kicking off the tier list once again for episode 4 act 1, we have none other than Jett on top. Even with new competition in Neon, Jett's kit still allows her to sit at the top of the duelist class and the competitive meta in general. Despite Jett losing one of her smokes last year and losing her ability to break Cypher's trips with her dash, she still has one of the best entry paths for a duelist currently in the meta, which allows her to dominate on the attacking half of maps. Jett's versatility that her kit allows her to have makes it very hard to stop her when she gets the ball rolling in a round. Jett is still the queen of the duelists, but there's rumors that Jett might finally be nerfed in coming patches, so nothing is set in stone for episode 4. And if you want to set yourself up to be good with any agent when changes inevitably come, you're going to want to build on your fundamentals. That's why I have to recommend AimLab, the best free aim trainer on the market. AimLab has all the tools you need to improve your aim to the top level, with playlists handpicked by the pros, a partnership with Valorant to create custom in-game scenarios, and also nifty metrics that can help you track progress to the top. If you want crisp aim and smooth tracking, then click the link in the description to download AimLab today. Second place for the S tier for this patch is going to go to the Cosmic Controller. Astra is already really strong as a controller. She's dominant on every map outside of Icebox and Breeze, where Viper is a bit more useful in terms of vision blocking with her wall. Simply put, Astra's tools in her kit allow her to control the flow of a round and corral enemies to exactly where she wants them to be. Astra's CC abilities give her the freedom to manipulate attacking teams' pushes, which makes her a Sentinel controller hybrid, and it allows her to shine the best on defense. Despite having some weaknesses with being immobile since she needs to be in astral form a lot, she is still overall the best controller. Lately, players have been experimenting on her where she is even becoming an option to use on Breeze, which says a lot about how strong she is as an agent. Closing out the S tier, we have none other than Viper. Viper, like Astra, is a formidable Sentinel controller hybrid. She can vision block with her wall and her ultimate, and she has great CC with her smoke and molly, which allows her to inflict damage on her enemies en masse. Viper is viable on most maps, and she is a must pick on maps like Breeze and Icebox, which in turn is great. Viper is an agent that requires a lot of experience and game sense in order to truly take full advantage of her kit, but nonetheless, her raw damage output and how she creates space with her abilities makes her a problem for any enemy team that has to go up against a well-trained Viper. Starting off the A tier, we have the Russian hunter Sova. At the moment, Sova is still really good, but he's falling slightly behind as teams pick up more Skye and KO in their team comps. On some maps, he's no longer as favored as he used to be, compared to his initiator counterparts. For example, Sova was a must pick on maps like Haven and Bind. His arrows allowed him to sniff out defenders and attackers really well on those maps. Now teams favor the versatile utility from KO, Breach, and Skye, especially since those agents have flashes and they offer more than just info gathering in their kits. Sova is still a great agent, but the competition in the initiator class is starting to catch up to him as the other initiators become more popular and more polished on teams. Now the ranking you've all been waiting for, coming in at the number 2 spot in the A tier, we have Neon. Neon is shaping up to be a very influential duelist in the meta. She is arguably the best entry pathing in the game outside of Jett, and she has great utility in her stun grenades to clear her corners and incapacitate her enemies. If it weren't for the fact that Jett wasn't nerfed as we entered episode 4, Neon could very well be taking the top spot in the duelist hierarchy. But right now, Neon is definitely the number 2 duelist in the game, right behind the Queen. First impressions on which maps she will dominate on, she particularly seems to do well on bigger, more open maps like Breeze, Haven, and Ascent, where she can run around freely and use her speed to her advantage. One of Neon's only weaknesses is that at the moment, her kit seems to be more tailored towards attacking than defending. While her flame wall does allow her to entry path in cleanly, and her stuns and ult allow her to clear out enemies on site quickly, don't think that she won't be useful on defense. Neon's speed makes her arguably the best rotator in the game since she can traverse the map in half the time it would take the other agents, which allows her to have constant presence and pressure on the map since she can get in attacking teams' faces quickly. If you want to learn more about the ins and outs of Neon and where she'll end up in the meta, look out for our only Neon guide you'll ever need, which should be coming out very soon. For the first time in a while, Skye is starting to heavily compete with Sova for being the priority pick as an initiator on some maps. All the utility she has in her kit is starting to make some teams question if Sova's arrow and drone is more valuable than Skye's flashes, dog, healing, and ultimate. And for some teams, that answer is no. The Skye meta from last summer seems to have died down since she received a couple nerfs earlier last year, but she's still proving to be very strong at all levels of play. Her flashes are still probably the most broken in the game, and that means she always has a place on teams as a solid threat. Her kit as a whole has a bit of everything you'd want in a support: flashes, heals, and information gathering. Skye is becoming a priority pick in the meta on some maps where Silvia isn't as good, such as Fracture and Split, so keep that in mind when you're in agent select in your games. Out of all the Sentinels in their current state, Chamber is up good in the meta. After being introduced, he proved that he is very potent at being a duelist Sentinel hybrid. This allows him to collect kills while also being mobile around the map and showing presence on defense. And the fact that he is mobile is due in part to his teleport ability, and it's also due to the fact that his trips allow him to play off bomb sites and float around the map to help his team without having to worry about being flanked. Chamber looks like he will play a big role in the overall meta in 2022, and you can see pro players playing Chamber very often on some maps like Haven or Icebox currently. Moving on to one of my favorite initiators right now, we have Killjoy's best creation, KO. I have been singing high praises of KO ever since he was released, and now a lot of the community is starting to understand why. Once you come around and realize just how much of KO's kit has to offer, you'll start to question if you should bring him over Skye and Silvia in some situations. As the competitive meta starts to shift away from double duelist and moving into double initiator, KO is making a very strong case for himself to be ran alongside a Silvia or a Skye depending on which agent your team chooses to be their main initiator. Suppression is definitely a mechanic that was built for the future, and right now it's starting to prove effective as a consistent counter to defensive setups. And as more agents consistently get added into the game, KO's stock value will only continue to go up as time goes on. Closing out the A tier is Killjoy. The reason she's falling down is because people are getting used to playing around her setups, which means it's starting to get harder to get actual value out of her setups. Teams are recognizing what's going on, so it's easy to counter you and harder for you to get your teams to fall into your traps. She's a good agent, but she currently lacks the tools to be creative as a Sentinel, and that can hurt her in the long run as players already have lineups to take out Killjoy's ultimates or a good idea of where her utility is being placed. Reyna is being demoted to B tier simply because of Neon's introduction into the game. She is not the best overall duelist as that crown goes to Jett, and Neon is definitely going to give her formidable competition for teams that want to run that second duelist in their comp. One thing Reyna does have over other duelists right now is her ability to self-heal, which gives her much better sustainability and self-dependency the longer a round goes on. But this current attacking meta revolves around speed and agility, and Jett and Neon simply do that job better. As always though, a good player on Reyna is scary to deal with, especially in ranked games where individual fights are much more common. Raze is starting to become more and more of a niche duelist as other duelists around her start to rise up in the meta. Raze is down in B tier mainly because she doesn't have self-sustainability in her kit, which prevents her from being durable throughout a round. And she also suffers from being a one-dimensional agent, as her kit is very damage-oriented. She can also scout for info with her boombot, and she can have fairly decent mobility with her blast packs, but that takes measurable skill in order for it to become a decent asset to your game. Raze isn't bad as a duelist, but she definitely isn't able to compete with the likes of Jett at the moment. Sage as an agent is in a unique spot. She oftentimes is viable in solo queue, but she's not a must-pick for a team comp. This is because Sage's kit does well in solo queue, especially in lower elos, because Sage has the ability to erase mistakes your team makes, via her heal and revive. The second half of her kit is for stalling, but many players are used to working around that by bursting through before she can throw her slows, and instantly breaking her wall the second they see it go up. As a Sentinel, Sage lacks info gathering and flank watch capabilities, which puts her below her counterparts in the meta. Sage is a good pick for ranked, but if you need a decent agent that has a simple kit, but you're in the higher tiers of ranked, you're better off picking another Sentinel. Cypher is finding himself where he is in a bad position in the game's meta. He is starting to turn into the Omen of the Sentinel class. The reason he's finding himself in this predicament is due to the fact that all the other Sentinels can do things that he can't, and their kits are more diversified outside of being a one-dimensional flank watch plus camera character. Killjoy, Astra, and Viper all have more Sentinel-like sight denial capabilities, plus Astra and Viper have vision blocking capabilities as well. In fewer words, Cypher is great if you're already a Cypher main, but if you need a Sentinel and you aren't well versed on his setups, you should pick any other Sentinel because they will give you much more value as a baseline. Another agent that is up good but not a must pick in the meta is Breach. Breach is in a weird position where he's unviable on most maps, but almost god tier on Fracture alone. This is due to the fact that his abilities now counter Killjoy's abilities, and Fracture's map layout is designed in a way where his CC abilities cover more ground than they would on the more traditionally designed maps. For example, Breach's fault line and ult can cover a lot more ground just by tweaking which angle you activate it at. Fracture's H-like design allows his abilities to reach out and stun whole lanes if needed. Outside of his meta status on Fracture, every other initiator currently brings a lot more to the team comp and is much more favored outside of Fracture. And at the bottom of the B tier is Omen. It hurts to see the spooky ghost at the bottom of the totem pole, but this is a signal that he needs some help from the devs, because his current kit just isn't cutting it. We will admit that Omen isn't outright bad. He's suffering from power creep in the controller class, and mostly because Astra and Viper are leagues better than him. At his core, Omen is a mobile controller, which is something that Astra and Viper can't claim. But since Astra and Vipers function as a Sentinel duelist hybrid, they can lock down defensive sides of maps in ways Omen just can't compete with. Omen needs buffs because he can be a good controller, he just needs something to make him worth picking over everyone else. Let me start this section out by saying that although Brem is in C tier, he's not useless or completely unviable. He still has some of the best post-plan abilities in the game, which makes him worth rolling with if your team needs round insurance on attack. But he doesn't excel at much of anything outside of maybe post-plants where he can delay for quite a bit of time with his molly and his ultimate. Brimstone's kit just feels very lackluster, and having only 3 smokes makes it hard for him to feel good throughout a round like an Astra or a Viper can. Add on an almost useless skill in his stim beacon, and you're just looking at an agent that isn't able to compete with the stars of the controller class. You hate to see it, but Phoenix is in the middle of C tier. Compared to this time last year when he was one of the best duelists in the game, it's been a long fall for the British duelist. Why is he struggling, you ask? Well, there's 2 things that plague Phoenix as an agent. The first thing is that his kit is generic and doesn't excel at one style of gameplay that complements his entry frag and playstyle. The second thing is that the other duelists seem to have found niches that they're uniquely good at, which makes Phoenix lower priority. And of course, there's also the fact that double duelists aren't as popular anymore. Phoenix either needs big buffs or a rework of some kind because his current kit is getting power creeped out of the contention in the meta. And finally, it is rumored that Yoru's rework is fast approaching, and we could see it soon sometime this act. With that being said, Yoru is looking good so far from what we've seen from the devs teasing his rework. We will evaluate where he fits in the meta once his rework drops. But until then, we wait patiently and hope his rework revitalizes him as an agent and gives us another viable duelist that won't be considered a troll pick anymore. And that concludes our patch 4.0 tier list. If you enjoyed this tier list, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to keep up to date with the latest Valorant news, updates, and guides. Also, make sure to check out our website for truly amazing on-demand coaching. This has been your host, Sergeant Frost, and good luck on the grind this act.